Excellencies, Madam Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. I now call the Commission to order. We shall begin our consideration of Agenda Item 9, Bracket B, Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific 2017. I should like to mention that all panel discussions are being webcast live. And welcome to all of those who are connected to us virtually. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the document E/ESCAP/73/29, Summary of the Economic and Social Survey of Asia and the Pacific 2017, has been circulated. Excellencies, the purpose of this panel discussion on the challenges that countries in the region face in improving their institutional frameworks to enhance fiscal management. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ms. Shamshad Akhtar, Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to introduce the key findings and recommendations of the survey, and for the panelists to come to the rostrum. Your Excellency.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's the last day of the Commission, and I'm sure you all are kind of looking forward to wrapping this up. But this is a very important flagship of the UN ESCAP, and it has a fairly wide readership, and we have been able to launch this in 35 hubs in different parts of the world. We very much value our work, economic and social work, because it helps us understand the region a bit better, but also it is something that helps our member states. So welcome to this, formally to this panel discussion. As a basis of for discussion, I'd like to first give you a brief overview of the Economic and Social Survey of Asia and Pacific. But before I do that, let me call the panelists first, and then I will give the overview. So let me call upon the Minister of Finance and Economic Development of Kiribati, Mr. Tortio. Then I'd like to call Jose Yusamat, Minister of Employment, Productivity and Industrial Relations of Fiji. His Excellency Abdul Sattar Murad, Minister of Economy of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Ms. Navarro, Undersecretary, National Economic and Development Authority, NEDA of the Philippines. Good to have one woman in the panel. And Dr. Rathan Roy, Director at the National Institute of Public Finance and Policy in India. Good to see you. Hi. Thank you for being here. Executive Secretary, need to switch around. Oh, okay. Moderator has to be in between. I have to switch the chair. So now that we're all settled on this podium, let me brief you on the annual flagship publication in a little broader detail. Of course, there's very rich empirical evidence in the report, which is available in the PowerPoint presentation form 2 in our website, but the full report is a very interesting report. This year's report, besides providing the overview of the macroeconomic situation and its elements, it focuses on improved governance and fiscal management for our region's development. Now, I know governance is a very large subject, but we tried to present a very focused, conceptual debate in our report on the fiscal management aspects of governance. The global recovery seems to be firming up. This is the good news. It's been supported by economic growth in our region, up from 4.9% in 2016 to an expected 5% in 2017. The region now accounts, as I have reported earlier during the commission, for over a third of the world's output, but a growing distrust of globalization in a number of export markets is leading to short-sighted protectionism and creating global uncertainty. Left unaddressed, this uncertainty could dampen growth in Asia and the Pacific, a region that has traditionally depended on exports for jobs and prosperity. There are specific policy simulations in our report to indicate the extent to which global uncertainty can impact growth. In recent years, the Asia-Pacific region has skillfully managed exogenous shocks, particularly the shrinking of advanced economies' output since the global financial crisis. In the face of a prolonged period of weak external demand and global trade, economic growth in our region has recently relied more on domestic demand, especially private consumption. This has been supported by low inflation and low interest rate environment. Yet, these changing global dynamics underscore the urgency of further increasing domestic and regional demand, supporting intra-regional trade, and sustainably improving transport, energy, and ICT connections. China's economic conditions remain stable. Rebalancing, restructuring, and deleveraging have led to a new normal growth trends in the country, averaging 6.7% over 2015-2017. Higher value-added sectors are increasingly driving output and employment. The other large emerging economies in the region, India, is on road to recovery as consumption and infrastructure spending increase, and the disruption caused by the cash flow because of demonetization has now normalized and perhaps will have dividends. More broadly, South Asia's economic growth potential continues to be limited by structural challenges such as inadequate infrastructure and an energy deficit, and hence our emphasis on regional cooperation and integration. These can only be overcome by increasing levels of public investment, which would have significant fiscal implications to Southeast Asia. Higher growth rates are forecast for most economies, backed by an expected rise in commodity prices and supportive macroeconomic policies. Fiscal and current account deficits and high levels of household debt persist in some of these sub-regions' economies. In the Pacific, a modest improvement in near-term growth is forecast. This is again supported by rising global commodity prices, but also increased trade, stable tourism receipts, and infrastructure investments. In North and Central Asia, after 2 years of contraction, positive economic growth is anticipated in 2017. In the Russian Federation, this will be driven by higher oil prices, even though steps are being taken to diversify the economy. Outlook for Russia has clearly improved. The growth outlook for 2018 is expected to rise to 5.1%. However, for the major developing countries, growth could be 1.2 percentage points lower than the baseline projections if trade protectionism and global uncertainty increases. And this was the point I was making upfront also. Productivity gains rather than factor accumulation, backed by institutional and governance reforms, are needed to stimulate better regional outcomes. Without robust private investment, a durable and sustained growth recovery will be hard to achieve. Monetary policy stances in the region have recently shifted from accommodative to neutral as upside risks to inflation increased due to non-domestic demand factors such as oil prices and exchange rate depreciation. Countries should also consider strengthening capital flow management and macroprudential measures to mitigate the effects of exchange rate volatility and ensure financial stability. Developing countries' average debt to GDP ratio stands at 40.8%. Fiscal policy needs to focus on improving the quality of growth. This could be done by enabling productive investments in infrastructure and social protection, and through more efficient use of natural and energy resources. Public infrastructure investments should be designed to attract private investment, to facilitate structural transformation that promotes the creation of decent jobs. Reprioritization of expenditure, hence, is critical, but the scope to increase spending will depend on tax collection. With a tax to GDP ratio in the region's developing countries of just 16.4%, revenues could be significantly increased by broadening the tax base and improving compliance, and hence our substantive work on financing for development is critical for the region. Given the growing demands on fiscal policy to support the economy and overcome social and environmental challenges, the 2017 survey examines how effective governance could help deliver sound fiscal policy and improve fiscal management. The survey finds the countries that perform better on governance measures, which focus on the rule of law, regulatory quality, control of corruption, and government effectiveness, tend to mobilize and spend their fiscal resources more efficiently and more effectively. Between 2005 and 2014, poor governance contributed to lowering tax revenues by up to 21%, and in some countries more than this, in my view. The survey highlights the importance of transparency and accountability and recommends strengthening of production and dissemination of key fiscal data, as well as the development of public administrative capacities to monitor, evaluate, and audit policies. Let me conclude. There is a lot of richness in the report. In interest of time, I cannot cover all this, but I strongly recommend you all to have a look at it. It recommends that there is an urgent need for governance and effective fiscal management to promote growth, social inclusiveness, and environmental sustainability across Asia-Pacific region. A multilateral approach is needed to deepen regional economic integration and increase regional demand. Intra-regional trade and connectivity is critical in this process, alongside an increased focus on social inclusiveness and environmental sustainability. Action in these areas will be crucial to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and regional cooperation to stimulate intra-regional trade. I'm looking forward to, of course, hearing the views of our distinguished panelists on these issues. But before I hand them the floor, I wanted to also draw your attention to look at not only this report, which lays out the economic, social, and other challenging dimensions that our region faces, but also look, on the other hand, to all our delivery that we've had presented in the last few days. And you will see that this sinks in very well with, it offers the diagnostics, it offers the broader macro perspective, but then the recommendations of all these reports have always been translated into our operational and implementation support. So we have a very deep relationship here between our macroeconomic poverty and financial hub and the nexus with all our other functional divisions that are shaping up the policy responses too. And of course, this particular division has assumed renewed significance after restructuring that it underwent, both in terms of enhancing the quality of the think pieces that come out of it, but adding an element of financing for development which deepens the impact of this particular division. But this is not because of me alone sitting out here. This is because of the hard work of the divisions and their reaching out to other divisions to work as one UN ESCAP. So I'd like to thank from this podium all the hard work that has gone in and the intellectual support that has been provided by this division. It's come a long way in the 3.5 years that I've been sitting here, and I really think that tribute goes to them. So with this, thank you for your attention and also to listening to my sharing the achievements of the individual divisions. So let me switch the gears now. Let me call upon to our panelists one by one with specific questions. First, I'd like to throw in a theme of efficiency of spending. So we've changed the dynamics on how we run this panel relative to the last few years. And I'm going to draw from our Afghanistan, Kiribati, and expert on India with the question, as you have heard and as you know, Asia-Pacific economies lead global economic growth, although its dynamism has decreased in recent years, but the engine continues to pump. With monetary policy stances having shifted from accommodated to neutral, as upside risks of inflation have increased, proactive fiscal policy will be important to stabilize the economy and crowd in private investment. This requires effective governance and fiscal management. The 2017 survey, as you would have noticed, finds that governance has a significant impact on public expenditure efficiency and the mobilization of tax revenues in many countries. So let me, with this overview, turn to our panelist, His Excellency Abdul Sattar Murad. Public sector efficiency increased significantly, but it is still well below that in several Asia-Pacific countries in Afghanistan. Can you please share with us how the government of Afghanistan is addressing these issues? Because I know firsthand from our bilateral discussion on the amazing work that you and your cabinet are doing in this area. So over to you, Your Excellency.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Akhtar. And I believe the main goal of government fiscal policy is to provide better services, respond to security threats in case of Afghanistan, and focus on education, invest in infrastructure, and eventually bring macroeconomic stability. Government of Afghanistan is developing 3-year fiscal plans. These plans are revised based on changes in macroeconomic environment and underlying assumptions that are used for forecasting. Fiscal strategy for 2017 and 2020 presents government's midterm fiscal goals in a clear economic framework. Therefore, the fiscal strategy paper effort has been put to develop plans for available resources in line with Afghanistan National Peace and Development Strategy, which is consistent to government priorities. The mentioned goals are as follows. 1. Supporting fiscal discipline through improvement in revenue collection and making the spending effective. Achieving fiscal sustainability target in which operational expenditure is financed by domestic resources. Narrow budget deficit or a balanced operating budget, and borrowing from international finance organizations at a much lower interest rate or looking for concessionary loans. And going to the spending during the fiscal year 2016, in general, significant reforms were brought to the public financial management. Among the fiscal reforms, public financial management reform through inauguration of a 5-year plan, rolling plan, as well as approval of the public-private partnership law, are the significant reforms to mention. In a self-assessment plan under the 5-year rolling plan, the performance of agencies and administrators and ministries are assessed by program leadership teams, and budget is allocated based on their past performance. Initially, the program was implemented in 19 administrative units, including directorates of Ministry of Finance and independent directorates. Other reforms during the current year include approval of 10% value-added tax, the Parliament, which will be approved by Parliament very soon, and will be enforced in the large taxpayers' office from 2002. Therefore, certain steps have taken place to present a public financial management system, reducing the risk of corruption, improving budget execution, developing a financing strategy for development, and improvements in government's capacity to deliver. Therefore, the government of Afghanistan in July 2010 at COP International Conference presented the public financial management roadmap consisting of 3 years reform targets as one of its national priority programs, which is in practice right now. Back to you, Doctor.
Thank you. That's very impressive. Let me turn to Pacific Island developing states, including Kiribati. You have relatively narrow economic bases and moreover are extremely vulnerable to external shocks such as disasters and climate change induced extreme weather events. These can make fiscal management much more challenging, not least by making revenue streams volatile. Could you share with us how government of Kiribati is managing such challenges? What is the scope for regional cooperation in helping to address these issues?
Thank you very much, Madam Secretary General, the Executive Secretary, for that very interesting but challenging question on the development challenges facing the Pacific Island countries and the implications of those challenges on the fiscal policy and that a policy instrument that countries might consider or might have taken already to address and manage those challenges. The Pacific region represents an interesting mix of countries ranging from the well-endowed and resourceful countries like Papua New Guinea and Fiji to the small size and low-lying atoll countries with very limited resources but growing population, like countries like my country Kiribati and Tuvalu. Despite their diversity culturally and in their level of development, the countries share similar challenges and opportunities as small and remote island economies. I like it when people say that the Pacific region represents a microcosm of the small island state universe, because that makes it special. Of course, small is beautiful, or is it? But as always in life, the cool things in life come with a price tag. And the price of being small is isolation from the world market, narrow production base, susceptibility to these economies of scale, and vulnerability to external shocks. Madam Moderator, since your question is specific to my country, Kiribati, I will focus my intervention on Kiribati, sharing my insight on the unique challenges facing Kiribati and how the government, through its fiscal policy and other policy interventions, manages those challenges. I would thus also underscore for regional cooperation in helping to address these issues. As a small island state, Kiribati's development effort has been hampered by the typical problems associated with being small, namely small internal market, isolation from world market, a narrow production base, vulnerability to external shocks and natural disasters, and the susceptibility to economies of scale in production, transport, and administrative services due to internal geographical fragmentation. And if that is not enough, there is still the most formidable challenge of all: climate change and the resulting sea level rise. This economic and structural constraint pose severe limit on the growth potential of Kiribati by limiting its transformation capacity. So how does the government of Kiribati manage these challenges without undermining fiscal sustainability? Achieving fiscal sustainability against the backdrop of this constraint and challenges that I have just mentioned, coupled with the limited financial resources that Kiribati has at its disposal, pose an enormous challenge to the government. Kiribati is heavily dependent on fishing revenues, which account for 70% of its total budget. For instance, in 2014, revenue from fisheries was about just $100 million. Then in 2015, it reaches $205 million. Then this year, last year, it declined to $150 million. And again, for this year, we estimated that we will be just around about $100 million to be received. So you can imagine the volatility in the revenue source that Kiribati depends on for its fiscal policy and for its public spending programs. The highly volatile and uncertain nature of this revenue source demand that the government take decisive steps to manage its programs and expenditure priorities well to avoid unsustainable and costly fiscal overruns. But more importantly, to ensure that the necessary essential public services, the delivery of the essential public services are not compromised. This situation calls for strengthened fiscal framework based on a balanced structural budget over the medium term, taking into account the volatile nature of the fiscal revenue as I just mentioned. It needs the strengthening of the role of the country's only reserve fund. We call it the Revenue Licensing Reserve Fund, which is now amounting to almost 9 million Australian dollars. And they use that as an anchor for long-run fiscal sustainability. More importantly, it also demands a very innovative measure by the government. The example I'm saying here is the creation of what we call a fiscal buffer or cash reserve buffer that will be set aside to cover the government in the event of the unexpected downturn in the fisheries revenue. For the 2018 budget, for instance, we have set aside 40% of the total budget as a cash reserve buffer, which would cover the government's operations for 4 months in the event of an expected downturn in fisheries revenue. Kiribati cannot rely on fishing revenue alone, given its volatile and cyclical nature, as I have just explained. We need to diversify and broaden our revenue sources to protect the government bottom line from shocks and expected shortfalls from fisheries. Some of the new revenue sources the government is exploring include the imposition of excess fees for the use of Kiribati airspace by international airlines, maximizing its revenue from fisheries, and I think I did mention earlier that that is the single source of revenue on which the government of Kiribati depends for its public spending program. And there are now plans to maximize our share of the income from fishery revenue. As most of you are aware, the fishing nations that are fishing in the waters of the Pacific Island countries took about thousands and thousands of millions from our fishery resources, and the amount that the Pacific countries get is only 5% of that amount. So the government is working vigorously hard to ensure that our share of that fisheries revenue is increased. And we are taking steps now to ensure that that happens through the introduction and implementation of policy changes through our agreement with our fishing nations. Fiscal management is not only about managing the revenue side of the budgetary equation per se. It is also, and perhaps more importantly, about managing, controlling, and improving the quality of public expenditure. Gone are the days when the fiscal budget is viewed only in terms of the amount, level, and the authority to spend them. Today, the fiscal budget is viewed in terms of its multiplier effect on investment, savings, and production. So it is critically important, therefore, that the budget is done properly to ensure fiscal sustainability and that the delivery of public services are not compromised. On the expenditure side, the government will review and control certain expenditure that are wasteful and unproductive. This includes overseas travels, Kiribati membership in certain international organizations, and reducing subsidies to non-performing state-owned enterprises. We will continue to implement state-owned enterprises to review their performance and to liquidate those that are non-performing. Climate change, I think I did mention that climate change is one of the single greatest threats facing the low-lying countries like Kiribati, and one that have very serious implications on the bottom line of the countries. We expect climate change to have adverse effect on the agricultural productivity, Given the growing importance of agriculture in the Outer Islands, with the improved copra price, which the government has just introduced, we have increased the price of copra now from $1 to $2 a kilo, even though the price of copra in the world market is far below $1. But government did this as part of its social protection program to help especially the poor countries in the Outer Islands. But like I said, the one adverse climatic event could wipe out the agricultural base of these smaller island, the Outer Island countries. In this regard, it is important to explicitly incorporate in the budget the climate change adaptation costs, including coastal protection, damage repairing, and soil desalinization of around 2% of GDP over the medium term. A holistic climate change and natural disaster management strategy will clearly define priorities and long-run goals, together with a strengthened PFM system, would have Kiribati tap into global climate change financing sources and other resources as provided under the agreement. Madam Moderator, I haven't touched on the role of regional cooperation that they can play in helping the countries address these challenges. But I think it goes without saying that regional cooperation would play a very, very useful role in helping these countries address these challenges. And one of help that they can provide is through capacity building. And we have been benefiting quite a lot from the PIFTAC in Fiji, part of the IMF, in helping us to carry out our public finance management reform. So with those few words, Madam Moderator, I know I'm running a bit over time, but it's quite clear that the challenges facing the small island states, especially in the Pacific, are quite formidable. But these are not insurmountable. With proper policies and institutions in place, we can turn these challenges into opportunities and ensure that our people live a decent living standard. Thank you.
Thank you for those insightful comments. Very straightforward. The issue of volatility of revenues, given the very high concentration and dependent on one source, is a big challenge, and I congratulate you for putting it across so well. Let me now move to discussion on India. So, Ratan, perhaps you are the right man for it. India could have raised more tax revenues in the past decade. Could you possibly share with us your insights on the policies that can be implemented to raise more tax revenues while improving governance, both on overall public financial management?
Okay, well, thank you, Shamshad. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, an honor to be back, and I'd like to especially congratulate ESCAP for this, I think, the best report I've read in recent years. I'm not just saying that because of the fiscal chapter, but it's really important, I think, that countries in Asia are able to organize themselves independent of the traditional frameworks, the IMF, the OECD, to sort of think to these things collectively. Okay, on India, I would say that there are three levels at which this question should be looked at. The first is the most difficult. It's something I have to deal with as a public finance guy all the time. So people come and tell me that, India spends only, public spending on healthcare in India is 1.2% of GDP. It's lower than Kenya, it's lower than Nepal, and we need to raise it. So I say, well, where would you like me to find the money? And the answer comes, raise the tax GDP ratio. Fine, but we should know what we are getting into when we talk about raising the tax GDP ratio. So if you look at India's sort of the size of Indian government from the financing side, the central and state governments taken together tax 17% of GDP and borrow between 7 and 8% of GDP. That's our combined fiscal deficit. That's already a quarter of GDP. That's a lot of money to be spending in the public domain. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's inappropriate. It does require a political decision. So if I'm going to raise public health expenditure by not spending less on something else, by let's say 3%, that means the size of my state is 28% of GDP. I've said this in a recent report. I mean, we need to have a public debate on this. Do you want a state that is 1/3 of GDP without much transfers? Or do you want a state that is just right at 25, or do you want a smaller state? Because if I now raise tax GDP ratios from 17 to say 19 or 20, I will not use them to increase public expenditure. I will use them to reduce debt. So this is the first conundrum we are facing in India. The second conundrum is that we have just opened this debate, in South Asia, as you know, Shamshad, we tend to avoid taxing agriculture because a lot of poor people sort of subsist on agriculture. And the idea was that as the development transition happened, the proportion of population dependent on agriculture would fall. But what the paradox in India is, while GDP from agriculture is just 14%, the proportion of population dependent on it has only fallen from 60 to 42. So there are a lot of people in agriculture, a lot of smallholders. If you don't tax agriculture, that effectively reduces your tax base quite significantly. That's agricultural incomes. So these are the two, if you like, structural conundrums. The second conundrum is that India is a society, is a country where, as the finance minister said, the culture of not paying personal income taxes has become endemic. India is not yet a tax compliant society. So the number of taxpayers that you would expect to be paying personal income tax, just the number, compared to what you would expect from a $2.5 trillion economy, is very small. So the second focus is to increase, not even to increase, I would say to make sure that more people pay taxes for the same or a higher tax GDP ratio. Now, if more people pay taxes and people who are paying taxes now didn't pay as much as they did or paid less, then we'd be in a world where we could talk about raising the tax GDP ratio for a larger state. So that's the second conundrum we face with. On that, we have some good news. I'm not going to ascribe this to demonetization, but this year we have seen a 4 million more taxpayers compared to last year, and we expect that number to go up to as much as 9 million, which would be a quantum jump in the number of people paying personal income tax. So the strategy is to increase the number of people paying personal income taxes. On the corporate tax front, to reduce the headline corporate tax rate, which nobody pays. And the bigger you are, because of exemptions, the less you pay in terms of your corporate tax rate. So it's a biased tax. The government has recognized this. The strategy there is to move from 30% corporate tax rate headline to 25% and do away with most exemptions. That would again, we believe, have a Laffer curve effect and increase the tax GDP ratio quite considerably. The third challenge is, of course, the most difficult, which is to reform the tax administration. Our tax administration, bluntly, hasn't changed much since the British ran us, and this is true of most countries in South Asia. We don't have tax estimates. I've said this in public several times. We have tax targets. Targets is what colonial governments do. You set a target, you go out there, you torture somebody, you bring the money in. So from that, we are trying very hard to move to a estimates-based culture, that if GDP growth is X, then I think income tax should go up by so much. We put in the systems for that. We now have the IT spine in place to do that. The income tax department is transformed. So we are hoping that through systematizing the business of paying taxes, the willingness to pay taxes will go up, hopefully concomitant with improvements in the delivery of public services, which will further increase the willingness to pay. So in sum, three things. One, we need to take a decision on how high we want the tax GDP ratio to be. It's not as simple as let's increase it to spend on healthcare when you're already spending and borrowing 25% of GDP. Two, we need to get the number of people paying personal income taxes up and the headline corporate tax rate down and exemptions out. In combination, we believe that this will allow us, if we want to increase the tax GDP ratio far more easily than in the past. Third, we need to improve the systems underlying tax administration, move it away from a discretion-based system, so what some people call a tax terrorism system, to a rules-based system, and that's about, I'd say, 75-80% done now. We have 20% to go. The last mile is difficult, but we're trying hard. I won't pretend we're there, but we're 75-80% there. And of course, contingent upon all this is willingness to pay, and willingness to pay depends on how good a job we do in improving the delivery of public services for which we tax people and borrow from people in the first place. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, very excellent presentation. Can I draw upon you right away to share the perspectives on the value-added tax in India. I know there's reforms of the general sales tax in terms of it being brought more at the central level. Over to you.
The goods and services tax is possibly the most ambitious federal experiment in the history of certainly the 20th and 21st century of any country. We are here talking about 29 states of the Union which have constitutionally assigned powers to tax things, giving up those constitutionally assigned powers and working collectively with the central government to have a uniform structure of taxes on indirect goods and services across the country. I'm elaborating this because this is not the case, for example, with Canada. This is not the case with most countries that are federations. The value-added tax, or what we call the goods and services tax, in most federations does not involve the giving up of sovereign powers voluntarily and the introduction of a taxation system that is uniform across the country. So we are having a value-added tax, but as an economist or a public finance economist, Shamshad, you wouldn't recognize it as one. And that is because this constitutional experiment is on. But what it will do, I think, apart from anything else, is bring about in a revenue-neutral way, which is without losing tax revenue across the next 2 years, a genuine single market in India. And we think of it like this. We think of a truck going from, let's say, Punjab to my southernmost province of Tamil Nadu. At the moment, that truck carrying goods to Tamil Nadu has to stop at 6 different state borders. I want that truck to stop for nothing except gas. And that is the intention of this value-added tax. We estimate that even with the multiplicity of rates we have in the value-added tax, there are too many rates, and other things, the tax would result in a minimum permanent increase in GDP of 0.4 to 0.6%. Now, the value-added tax has taken a long time coming. It involves substantial compensation being paid by the center to the provinces that lose out from it for some time, and it involves a considerable effort in unifying IT systems. But sometimes, it's good to be the last mover and it's good to be India. This tax has been debated across 2 governments for 10 years. A consequence of which, and I speak from personal experience because we do this work, is that the systems, the training, the stuff we needed to do to prepare for the tax, we have done 3 times already. So we are actually triple ready for a change to get this tax going and to impose it. The computer systems are in place, the taxation, the tin is in place, the delivery network is in place. All we now need are the rates which ministers will be discussing tomorrow in Srinagar for the next 3 days, and we'll be ready to go by the 1st of July. So it's a very, very exciting development, and I would welcome other colleagues from other countries to come and look at the messy, the politically difficult, but finally the successful way in which India has managed to implement this epoch-making constitutional reform. Thank you.
Well, when I met the finance minister, he talked about it, and as you said, it is definitely a huge experiment and innovation going on in terms of a federally structured taxation system. And I do know the sovereignty of the states' sensitivities, having worked several years on India public finance matters. So thank you for those very insightful comments. Let me now turn to theme 2 on public accountability and audit systems and budgeting process. So let me call upon our panelists, Afghanistan, Philippines, and possibly again back to India. Improving the quality of governance relies on more transparency and accountability that can be strengthened with better fiscal data and its enhanced access, as well as adequate data management and monitoring mechanisms, including better control and audit systems for budgeting. Access to data for citizens and budget entities are important to ensure transparency and accountability. However, publicly available financial data, for instance in Afghanistan, is not yet providing a full picture. This is true of other economies too. Can you share with us your experience on improving fiscal data availability, taking into account the political and economic characteristics of your country? Over to you, Your Excellency, Mr.
Thank
Moran.
you, Dr. Akhtar. In fact, in Afghanistan, we have given the transparency and public access to data priority in all the national programs. Although we cannot wait for the problems to end, we have to begin putting in place the foundations of the economy and the foundations of the future administration. Already, Afghan government has made it a point that most of the ministries and most of the government structure, they are online available, and they have already put in place their system online. And anybody in the public as well as government agencies can reach out, and they have access to all data. One of the examples which I could say is that a system which is called CMRS, Central Monitoring and Review System, and also PMRS, Provincial Review System, Management and Review, Monitoring and Review System, which is already in place in Afghanistan. Anybody can, from any department or even from the donors, they can have access to all the spendings of the government and various programs taken from huge national projects, spendings, to small projects, to the community projects. To all of them, they have their access. And every department has their username and password. They can hang on and they can check projects and spendings all over the country. It has changed from what it was in the past. Right now, even the presidential palace, they can see every department's spendings and programs. The progress is seen through online access. And if I tell you, Afghanistan's access to information law came into effect in December 2014. Based on an assessment of the contents of this law, the Global Right to Information rating ranked Afghanistan at 63, comparable to even Switzerland, but better than Portugal, Spain, Turkey, Pakistan, Greece, Denmark, Belgium, Italy, Germany, and Australia. All public financial data in Afghanistan are available in the Ministry of Finance budget website. Some information are publicly available for public users, while some are only for development partners, which will be given access when officially requested. Although there are progress in e-governance, but it is still not satisfactory, and we work on it to improve it. National monitoring and evaluation mechanism are under process in most of the ministries and will soon operationalize. As I said before, about CMRS, PMRS, and MIS system, almost every government unit or department has its MIS system, which they all are connected to the central management information system, which almost the proceedings are electronically carried out, and all the progress are reported, and government can, from the central government, can see the progress and the proceedings almost in all the departments all over the country. And National Statistical Organization in Afghanistan, its main statistical organization, has taken critical reforms to collect quality data, conduct socio-demographic surveys, and address data gaps. And most of them are online, available to most of the government agencies as well as to the international participants. So the picture in Afghanistan may seem to some people who is not very close or acquainted to what is happening in Afghanistan, a bit dim, but now a lot of changes have come, and the government of Afghanistan has taken serious steps to give access to public to important data. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you for showcasing Afghanistan's reforms in this area. Let me turn to the Philippines. You've made impressive development achievements and governance reforms. It would be useful if you could share experience on one or two policy tools that were used to improve accountability. I have thus far not exercised a time limit, but I have been advised that we are running very late. So if people can be very succinct, because there are some very interesting questions further for all of you.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary, and let me congratulate you and ESCAP for coming up with this very insightful publication. Okay, very briefly, I think I can summarize the policy tool as declogging bottlenecks in budget execution and tightly linking spending and performance. But let me provide some examples. For the past 7 years, for a record of 7 years now, we've had the timely submission of the budget and passage of that in Congress. And this had prevented abuse and ensured prompt budget execution. And we've also included the public in budget discussions through timely publication of the National Expenditure Program. And this is the document that is being used by the Congress and the public at large in looking at what is the projected expenditure is. And this has a version in layman's terms, the People's Budget, which has infographics that are easy to follow. Now, the General Appropriations Act, or the law that is being passed each year to enact the national budget, and the details of this, that document is considered as a release document, meaning it's already valid and there's no need to require what we call Statement of Allotment Release Order, or SARO. So it's a kind of superfluous document or permit which became a source of corruption in the past. So we did away with that. And there were also other reforms that streamlined allotment, release, and obligation. We also speeded up and digitized procurement through not only an upgrade of what we call the PhilGEPS, or Philippine Electronic Government Procurement System, but also through a manpower upgrade. We also built an integrated public financial management system by unifying account codes and harmonizing the processes involving these unified account codes. And we also installed related ICT systems and, of course, built the capacity of public financial management professionals. We also have a performance-informed budgeting, which align agency spending with their performance targets. So right now, government agencies' rate of spending and meeting their promised deliverables are regularly reported, which reminds me, when I come back to the Philippines, I have to make sure that the rate of spending of offices under me, the 15 geographic offices of NEDA, are meeting their promised deliverables. Thank you.
Very impressive. Just one quick question and 1 second answer. In terms of the value-added tax, where do you stand? I know we had a great difficulty when I was in ADB to get this going, but it would be good to have a good account of it.
Of course, I stand with the executive, and it's part of the legislative agenda of the executive. It's being pushed by the economic managers led by the Secretary of Economic Planning, and also the Budget Secretary and the Finance Secretary. And the stand of Congress, that's a different matter, but we're pushing it through the legislative agenda secretariat, which is housed at NEDA, in my agency.
Yeah, I know the complexity with the Congress there. So let me turn to Ritin. Again, just 1 or 2 minutes intervention, please.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the question, which is basically a question on audit, there's nothing wrong with audit in India. We have one of the best public auditing systems, I think, in the world. The trouble is that audit is ex post, and what audit has been repeatedly telling us is that the quality of delivery of public expenditure, public services is appallingly poor. There are 2 prongs by which this is being addressed. One is the policy prong. Very briefly, that policy prong involves a massive quiet restructuring of the entire Indian central government public expenditure system. We've done away with plan and non-plan categories. We now look directly at establishment spending, spending on individual development schemes, and spending through other government agencies as expenditure categories, which will now enable us to hold the heads of these particular tasks accountable rather than sort of, trying to do it departmentally or focusing on individuals. The second important innovation that has happened is in the fiscal responsibility and budget management legislation, where we have now defined important milestones which have to be part of legislation. For example, how you treat contingent liabilities, how you make, inventories of capital assets. The third is, of course, IT-based. Let me give you just one example. We have something called a public financial management system, which the central government has adopted, and the state governments, it is voluntary, but they're adopting it. In this system, any officer with access to this system, and most do, can at the press of a button look at the bank account of any spending agency at any level, to judge not just whether money has been released by Treasury, but whether it's actually left the bank account and being spent. I understand leaving a bank account does not mean the money is spent, it could be misused, but at least we know now where money is being clogged, where it should go out. So in terms of the financial management system, this is a huge change, because remember, this government has to reach 1.2 billion people in terms of its public service delivery, which is a gigantic task. This combined with the new ID system, Aadhaar, combined with the automation of direct benefit transfers, I think is going to perceptively improve the quality and efficacy of public financial management in India. But it's not going to be the best in the world. It's certainly going to be better than what we have. And for now, that's good enough. Thank you.
Okay, let me turn to the next theme, which is about the decent jobs. There's a lot in our report on this, but basically the diagnostics is that relatively slow employment growth and a persistently high share of informal employment have contributed to rising income inequality. So we do know that our average employment growth in our region is modest, 1.1%, while the share of vulnerable employment is 50%. So obviously that perpetuates inequalities given the vulnerability. So let me now turn to our panelists from Fiji. How are you addressing the challenge to create decent jobs? And I will then come to Kiribati and the Philippines.
Thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. The issue of decent work or decent jobs is something that's always very important for us, because decent jobs, we're talking about making sure that work is as productive as possible, that people get a fair income, that they have some security, and that they have social protections. Because one of the things that we know the world over, there is increasing inequity. There's an increase in productivity, but the share of those productivity gains going to capital has continued to diminish around the world. And that is something that is also happening around the Pacific. In Fiji and in the small island states, the issue is not just decent work, but making sure that we have enough work for people. So in terms of enhancing job growth and enhancing employment, the big strategy that is being used in government is to try to ensure that we have economic growth in the first place. Thankfully enough, in Fiji, we've managed to get consecutive positive growth over the past 6 years, and we believe that it will take place again for another 4 years. Once you have economic growth, and the challenge is to make sure that that growth is as job-rich as possible. There's a lot of growth that is taking place, but the share of the productivity from that growth does not come to the workers. So that is going to be one of the things that we need to be able to address. One of the major things that we are trying to address in terms of decent work, in terms of governance, is to make sure that there are rights to things related to decent work in the Constitution itself. So that it is an overarching framework that governs everything that we do. So our 2013 Constitution has specific socio-economic rights that relate to this. It has rights relation to freedom of assembly, freedom of association, employment relations, the right to work and a just minimum wage, the right to economic participation. So already at the constitutional level, we have these rights embedded to make sure that we can move towards decent work in all that we do. As you pointed out, in a lot of our economies, we only have about 30% of our workforce in the formal sector. The vast majority is in the informal sector, and that is always a challenge. But within Fiji, there have been ongoing reforms in terms of our legislations. We have had reforms in terms of occupational health and safety legislation to make sure that if people are employed, the places that are employed are safe for them, and their health is able to be looked after. We have had employment relations reform, and this continues. Looking at, we had productivity reform, wages reform, and also review of workmen's compensation and other reforms. These reforms continue to take place. Currently in Fiji now, we have an exercise going. We are going through all of the legislation that we have and our existing structures and mechanisms for managing employment relations to make sure that they're in compliance with the ILO conventions, in particular, the 8 core conventions of ILO. So this is an exercise that continues to take place. And right now, next week, there will be another exercise taking place in Fiji where we have a high-level tripartite dialogue looking at the future of work and these issues of decent work to make sure that people don't miss out on the benefits of productivity growth will be addressed at that forum.
Thank you very much. That was very useful. 1 minute to Kiribati and 1 minute to the Philippines. So focus on only reforms that you're undertaking. I've been told will be cut off at 11:30 because there are country statements to take place in this platform. I apologize for this because this is tremendously valuable conversation, but we have to follow the rules of the game here. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Yes, in the case of Kiribati, it's because of its sphere, physical and structural constraint, the employment opportunities in the countries are very quite limited. As of now, the government of Kiribati is the main employer, the main producer, and the main supplier of almost everything. And the irony is that in Kiribati, 60% of the populations are youth. So that is in itself a kind of a time bomb ready to be go off any time. So this is a biggest challenge on the government to try to find ways of creating employment for these youth population. And of course, in terms of the way forward, I think the only logical and economically sound approach is to strengthen the private sector. And this is through the creation of the basic infrastructure, especially in the area of telecommunication, connectivity with the outside world. And I'm glad to say in this regard that we have now in the country 2 telecom operators, and the country is in the process of getting its own airlines to try to improve connectivity to the outside world, because I think this is one of the major constraints for foreign direct investment in the country. The speed of the internet now is improving quite a lot, and we are pleased to say that also in the pipeline we have the project with the World Bank that will lay the fiber optic cables between Kiribati, FSM, and Nauru, and this will greatly speed up the speed of the internet connectivity, and this will, of course, be attractive to the potential foreign investors. One other aspect of the employment opportunities that is now growing in importance is the seasonal employment with our neighboring countries in Australia and New Zealand. And when I came to this meeting, we were traveling with about 50 girls from Kiribati who would take up employment in Australia. And this is something that we need to leverage, we need to take full advantage of. And we are so thankful that countries, bigger countries like Australia and New Zealand are playing their part to contribute to the unemployment situation in Kiribati. So I think that's, Madam Moderator, how I think that government will make contribution to creation of decent employment. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry to rush you, but the Philippines now.
Yes, thank you. Well, in job creation, we're currently experiencing a manufacturing industry resurgence program, and there are a new set of incentives for firms, big firms and MSMEs, and this is leading to production expansion and, of course, job creation. There are also a lot of government projects, infrastructure construction, and this is also creating jobs for the people. On skills training, we support tech Voc schools, and we increase the budget and activities of our primary agency for this, and online courses are now being offered by that primary agency. But let me highlight an interesting development. Gender-responsive and age-responsive laws to promote and protect the rights of workers have been recently passed in 2011, we lifted the night work prohibition for women. But in the first place, the previous prohibition, which was enacted in 1970, was not strictly enforced. I didn't experience any gender discrimination. It's good, nevertheless, that this has been finally lifted on paper. And there is also now a prohibition on discrimination on the basis of age. There's no more discrimination against senior citizens, and it's unlawful to base the promotion of workers based on age. And it's also unlawful to impose early retirement because of old age. But still, we are strictly implementing below 18 years old as child labor. The consideration of that is for child labor. And we also expanded the maternity leave. It's now expanded to 120 days from 60 days.
While you have the floor, can I switch to the theme 4, social protection? You are famous in the Philippines for social protection programs, such as the 4 Ps. Could you elaborate 1 minute again?
Yes,
Sorry
definitely. 4 Ps, or what we call Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program. It's a conditional cash transfer program in the Philippines, and it's designed to break the intergenerational cycle of poverty through improved health, nutrition, and education of children, of course, funded by the conditional cash transfer. And based on recent studies, it remains credible and an effective and valuable instrument for poverty alleviation in the short run. And of course, it will lead to longer run effects through that intergenerational break in the cycle of poverty. On human development, it has positively impacted education because it helped to keep younger children in school. Enrollment participation rate has significantly increased. In health, 4 Ps promotes facility-based deliveries and access to professional postnatal care. More poor households in Pantawid barangays, barangays are villages in the Philippines, are reported to be covered by the health insurance program. And the study also, recent studies also found that spending on alcohol by poor households in Pantawid barangays was lower compared to their counterparts in non-Pantawid barangays. And while the program cash grants are not enough to completely keep children from working, it has nevertheless made beneficiary children spend less time working compared to the non-beneficiary counterparts. Finally, let me highlight the observation that the Philippines is experiencing high growth in recent years, and a metaphor for inclusive growth has been offered by some as this: a rising tide lifts all boats. But personally, I think we need an alternative metaphor, because although a rising tide lifts all boats, inequalities or the sizes of boats remain. Thus, an alternative metaphor could be, we need to build bigger boats for those who are left behind. And we can do that through greater and more effectively implemented social protection programs, among other programs, of course.
Okay, that's a good one. Let me move to the last theme, given that we have just few minutes left, and again 1 minute. This is regarding the cost of the environmental degradation and the concomitant health impacts and the intensive use of unsustainable use of countries' natural resources wealth. The region is highly vulnerable to climate change. As such, there are, of course, opportunity costs to that, and lifting poverty can be very challenging in this context. So let me turn to our Fiji panelists, but just short in terms of the recommendations or suggestions. SIDS has committed to ambitious targets and strategies on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Just tell us about the strategies. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Secretary. Yes, the Pacific Island countries and the small island states, they have set themselves a target in relation to the use of energy. And in particular, the goal has been to try to make sure that they fully move to renewable energy. That is something that is a big challenge for small island states in the Pacific. But it will, and this is reflected, for instance, in our green growth framework that we have in Fiji, where we have goals of trying to make sure that 100% of our population is able to access electricity, that most of it will be renewable electricity. We're trying to make sure that we encourage independent power producers entry into the electricity sector, to try to expand the current energy efficiency initiatives, and also implement things like major biofuel. In all of those areas, we will always need assistance. Assistance in terms of investment into this sector, especially because of the small markets that we have, the small domestic demand, access to clean energy and technology, including renewable energy, energy efficiency, and advancing cleaner fossil fuel technology, and promote investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technology. The goals are there, but in the small island states in the Pacific, it is not something that we can do on our own, and we will look towards to working in partnership with development partners and bigger countries that will be able to assist us in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give 1 minute, and I will cut off to each panelist to share anything on any of these themes with the audience. Just 1 minute each, otherwise you'll see my white blinking, my red blinking. Thank you. Sorry for all this. I apologize sincerely. First.
Well, somebody's asked me a question on demonetization. Let me just point out that demonetization is an instrument to achieve something that cannot be achieved in normal times, and therefore, if you judge the efficacy of demonetization with the extent to which it has succeeded in that endeavor, which was to get rid of cash that people had accumulated illegally and make it difficult for them in the future to accumulate such cash, that will take a year or two to judge. On the economy, it neither had a fantastic effect nor a terrible effect. So that's my straight answer. I'll conclude, I have 15 seconds, by saying that, one important thing about public finance is it finally involves the state and the use of coercive power. So when we talk about public finance, we should try and not do so purely technocratically. And if you were to go forward from the ESCAP report, I would say looking at for public finance in terms of the role of the state is a key direction in which all Asian economies should go. Thank you.
Thank you. To you, Madam.
Yes, thank you, Madam Executive Secretary. Let me emphasize that the role of the public's trust in institutions is very important. And the reforms will be sustained if we have the people's trust. And we in the Philippines is highlighting this through our Philippine Development Plan, which I described yesterday. And we have a specific chapter on ensuring people-centered, clean and efficient governance. Public accountability will be enhanced through reforms in administrative governance, strengthening of the civil service, reducing corruption, and achieving seamless service delivery. We also aim to have participatory governance by elevating and broadening participation of the general public in national development. And we also aim to promote shared responsibility and accountability with NGOs, civil society, in achieving the development goals of the country. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. I want to begin with about Afghanistan. There's very little information abroad, and Afghanistan is the present government is trying to make sure that the system is clean of corruption. Every government department has resorted to reforms. Every government department has come up with a strategy to fight corruption. And Afghanistan has endured almost 30 years of war. And it's one of the richest, potentially in the Central Asian countries, with huge, enormous resources. So the present government has resorted to reform the government offices and put in place a proper civil administration so that they could make use of these resources and potentials and prosper Afghanistan. Thank you, Doctor.
Over to you.
Thank you. I think in all the discussions that we'll be having on the development of our countries, the mantra at the end of the day is to make sure that we leave no one behind. And unfortunately, the way that the world is going now, as I've mentioned already in the brief that I had on decent work, it is inequities are rising. So whatever we need to do, we need to be able to make sure that that we do not leave anybody behind. And I believe that one of the most important things that can help us achieve that is what we've been talking about in this report, and that is good governance and strong institutions. When we have strong institutions, we can make that happen. And that is something that we have realized in Fiji. A lot of these institutions are within the government itself. So one of the things that the government of Fiji is focusing on is making sure that we have good reforms within the civil service itself. We've introduced open merit systems. We've introduced the ideas of fitness for purpose. When you appoint somebody to sit on a particular board, that person must be fit for that purpose. When you're able to do that and you're able to bring in all the different partners that we have, whether we're talking about health, or education, or decent work, or employment relations, it always needs a multi-sectoral approach. Once we're able to do all of that, we'll be able to make substantive progress towards what we want to achieve.
Our delegate from Kiribati.
Thank you.
Mr.
Yeah,
Minister.
I just want to underscore, the importance for the small island state to be innovative and to start thinking outside the box, especially when it comes to mobilizing finances to support their expenditure programs. And one of the ways, the things that Kiribati has considered is the consideration of private financing from private foundations from the United States or even in Europe. And we have been successful in securing those private funding sources. So this is something that needs to be encouraged for other countries, a small island state, to consider. For instance, why don't you ask the Bill Gates Foundation to finance the water and sanitation programs in the countries? So this is one thing that I need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you will all have enjoyed, as much as I have enjoyed, listening to our very, very sharp comments of the panelists. I'd like to thank all of them. I'm not going to summarize it because I've been told we need to get out of this podium. I sincerely apologize for the tight, I should have known it from the beginning, but I'd like to say that I have benefited from all these comments, and our panelists deserve a big show of hands. Sorry, it was very rough. I had such great, yeah.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the meeting is called to order. Distinguished delegates and excellencies, we shall now continue with a statement from delegations wishing to speak on the agenda item 9A, policy issues for the Asia-Pacific region, inclusive and sustainable economic and social development in Asia, and the Pacific through regional economic cooperation and integration. I would like to remind all speakers to help maintain the discipline of the 5-minute time allocations so that all delegations may have enough time to deliver their statements. In case delegations have longer statements, they may deliver a summary while the full text can be shared through the Commission website. And now we begin with our first speaker. This is Azerbaijan. Okay. So, first speaker is His Excellency Mr. Baron Devavisi Waka, President of NARU. The podium is yours, sir. It's coming. Okay, so we have to wait for a few seconds until the President arrives. Bit large. It's okay now.
Yes, I can write that.
Welcome, Mr. President. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished members of ESCAP, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to firstly express my deepest sense of gratitude on behalf of my government and the people of Nauru to the government of Thailand for the wonderful welcome and excellent arrangements since I arrived. And it affects our economic development and trade, to mention just a few. As small isolated states, humble respect, the state of mourning that Thais still hold in their hearts since the passing of one of the greatest men in Thai and indeed world history, the late King. The biggest challenge we all face today, which is climate change. The Pacific region is the most vulnerable part of the world where we talk of climate change. It does not mean, though, that we have to sit and wait for help to come to us. We have to be proactive and energized to push for development changes. Countries have common issues of concerns which have been echoed over and over many times in the past. The very high cost of Bhumibol Adulyade. Chairman, the Pacific and Asia are two regions connected by geography and through the migration of people. Climate change, it affects us all. It affects our weather, it affects our water supply, it affects our plants and animals, and it affects the movement and spawning of committed and be patient as changes don't happen overnight. Chairman, our most important undertaking in which my government has prioritized the allocation of diseconomies of scale and very high transportation and energy costs places a lot of restrictions on our economies and on people's personal finances over several millennia. The issues we face are interconnected, especially when we articulate things on a global scale, is the development of our new port. After a century of development associated with phosphate mining, our port's infrastructure is no longer able to cater for the population and its expanded infrastructure. Our proposed new port will be able to berth large cargo ships and bulk carriers with great efficiencies, whereas it is not possible to do this with the existing mooring system now. Nauru is working with the Asian Development Bank and traditional partners in order to realize this project. I wish to stress here that we value all the assistance that multilateral and bilateral partners have contributed towards this project. And we call on all of our good friends and partners, such as the ADB, Australia and the United States, to continue their good work and support towards this very important project. After all, the port is the catalyst for development on Nauru, and which without would set back all of our development plans. As a small island development state, Nauru has development challenges in just about all of its sectors. Several development projects have been realized or are in process of being realized that will improve the livelihood of my people. For instance, in regards to improving connectivity with the rest of the world, we have made major strides in improving our telecommunications services to the people. Ever since Digicel was established about 8 years ago, we have seen a major upturn in local businesses, facilitated through smartphones. Our use of smartphone is one of the highest in the world on a per capita basis, and this has resulted in bandwidth improvement within a short period of time since its establishment. From the original 2G service to the 4G which we now have. My government has issued another license for a second foreign operator to commence operations this year. This will be healthy for competition, and consumers will benefit through lower price of services, which includes voice, data, and television. In partnership with ADB, the World Bank, and with Kiribati and the Federated States of Micronesia, we are progressing well to have our submarine cable established by 2019. This will open up new opportunities for business growth, including improvement in services such as education and telemedicine. In regards to our air transportation services, the national air carrier, Nauru Airlines, has made traveling for Nauruans and Pacific Islanders much improved through more reliable services and connections within some island countries and the rest of the world. Via Brisbane, Australia. The airline has its own hangar, also based in Brisbane, and has made tremendous strides in improved connectivity with several Pacific Island states, including the Solomon Islands, Fiji, Kiribati, the Marshall Islands, Federated States of Micronesia, and will soon connect to Guam. Competition for scarce resources is always an issue to which we have carefully allocate to priority sectors such as health and education. But we must also allocate resources to projects that are sustainable in maintaining the island over the long term. Human resource development will continue to be a priority sector, as we need a skilled workforce in order to implement our development aspirations on a sustainable basis. We need to be self-sufficient in our food supplies in order to reduce our huge import bill for food, and we need to sustainably manage our fisheries, as this is a major food source. We also need to be self-sufficient to some extent on our energy supplies. Chairman, our National Energy Roadmap articulates that we develop renewable energy to supply 50% of our energy needs by 2020. We have completed projects, and some are in the pipeline for the installation for solar energy to try to meet the target of 50%. Chairman, we need free trade to facilitate development and economic growth, and we have PACER Plus earmarked for signing in Tonga next month. Nauru supports this endeavour, and as do most Pacific Island countries, including Australia and New Zealand. Last but not least, we have often discussed of climate-proofing our countries from the fury of extreme weather events, which we need to do also. What we need to do also is to finance proof for the future and prepare for the rainy days. In this regard, we have established an intergenerational trust fund which is on course of building a reserve capital of around 400 million by 2036. It is a fund established for the benefit of our future generations, and it is jointly managed between Nauru and Australia. Mr. Chairman, before I conclude, I would like to ask that we all pray for peace and stability of our region. We have very high tensions on the Korean Peninsula that could result in a very serious situation and potentially affect us all. Let us all be earnest in our prayers and thoughts. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your statement. Next on my list is His Excellency Honorable Samuela Akilisi Puheva, Honorable Prime Minister of Tonga. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Heads of Government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government and people of the Kingdom of Tonga, I extend our greetings. It is an honor and privilege to address you today on policy issues for the Asia-Pacific region and the goal of inclusive and sustainable economic and social development through regional economic cooperation and integration. In realizing that goal, we will unlock the potential of all citizens of our countries to have a better quality of life through access to all necessities and good governance, amongst many other benefits. I am of the view that the policy issues for the Pacific region, which are worthy of our discussion in this meeting, in light of the goal of inclusive and sustainable economic and social development through regional economic cooperation and integration, include the following: development good partnerships and access to resources, foster coordination, cooperation, economic and institutional integration, domesticate regional priorities to national plans and objectives, follow good processes which are transparent and accountable, promote inclusiveness whereby regional organizations and all stakeholders are involved, ensure effective and efficient implementation. The financing needs of small island states in the Pacific to achieve the sustainable development goals remain among the highest in the world. When measured against each country's GDP, Pacific Island states cannot rely on their domestic resources. The shared vulnerabilities of Pacific Island countries in food security, health-related issues such as NDCs, inadequate infrastructure, reliance on high-carbon energy, disaster risk, and other challenges call for regional coordinated responses. Regional economic cooperation and integration has brought transformative changes to Asia-Pacific region in the last 2 decades. It has powered trade and economic growth, supported investment and competitiveness, and strengthened the ability of policymakers to overcome domestic challenges such as governance, financial, human capital, and climate change, among others. Regional cooperation and integration is necessary to build infrastructure such as ICT. Improved regional connectivity will offer important development opportunities to LDC, LLDC, and SIDS. In light of Sustainable Development Goal 9, Tonga supports the aims and targets to provide universal access to ICT, which are fundamental to reducing the digital divide, alleviating poverty, and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and other internationally agreed development goals in Asia and the Pacific. Tonga will therefore continue to support the Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway Initiative, led by Bangladesh, towards promoting affordable and resilient broadband connectivity to Asia-Pacific countries. Furthermore, it is critical to have representatives of the Pacific Island states in the governing of the Council of the UN Asian and Pacific Center for ICT for Development. The government of the Kingdom of Tonga is the third most vulnerable in the world to the impacts of climate change, which cause to threaten our territorial land, water, infrastructure, food security, and livelihoods and ecosystem of our people. Climate change is one of the leading priorities in our national framework, actions, and continues to be over the next decade and beyond. Despite our very limited capacity to access technology, Tonga cannot afford to sit and wait for the sea level rise to continue while emissions of fossil fuels continue unabated. A bold vision is required, which must be translated into action that is supported by the international community. We reiterate our commitment to a target of an average temperature well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and to pursue efforts to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, recognizing that this would significantly reduce the risk and impacts of climate change. At the regional level, Tonga supports the framework Climate and Disaster Resilient Development in the Pacific, which provides guidance and support for the implementation of climate change and disaster resilient development in the Pacific Island region. Tonga ascertains its highest support towards the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 7 on access and affordable clean energy for all. A well-established energy system supports all sectors from medicines and education to agriculture, infrastructure, and high technology. Energy is a vital element of Tonga's social and economic development, and it enhances the well-being and livelihood of the Tongan people. The government of Tonga has taken extensive measures to ensure that clean and renewable energy is accessible and well-maintained, and that it assists in transforming the economic landscape, our physical environment, and ecosystem. Tonga was the first in the Pacific Island country to create the first clean energy roadmap, which recognizes the urgent need for a transition to renewable energy and its commitment to obtain 100% renewable energy by 2035. Tonga hopes that such national renewable energy goals can be greatly assisted through cooperation and bilateral, regional, and international levels. To support the national renewable targets, Tonga passed its Renewable Energy Act in 2008 to provide legal framework to promote and support clean, renewable energy for Tonga. The Tonga National Energy Bill 2016 aims at promoting the cleanest and cheapest energy in Tonga. This bill will be tabled to the Legislative Assembly later this year. On the ground, we now have 3 national solar farms in operation, plus localized farms which cater for 10% of our energy demands. Tonga also has its Island Renewable Energy Project, which covers the remaining outer islands of Tonga. This will ensure that Tonga will have access to 100% renewable energy with low power tariff. With the assistance of our donor partners, Tonga is now in the process of implementing its project for installation of wind power generation system to ensure that all Tongans will be accessible to clean energy source that is reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable. At the regional and international level, Tonga submitted its climate action plan well ahead of 2015 Paris Agreement, and Tonga is now aiming to reach 50% renewable energy by 2020. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and specifically Sustainable Development Goal 7, is our common roadmap, and this means that providing reliable, affordable, and clean energy for all is a responsibility of us all. In support of Sustainable Development Goal 14, Tonga has signed and ratified the Port State Measure Agreement in October 2016. This agreement is set to ultimately prevent and eliminate illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing through the implementation of robust port state measuring system. On Tonga's monitoring, controlling, and civilian program, Tonga has a visual monitoring system to closely monitor movements and activities of all fishing vessels in Tongan waters to ensure compliance with fisheries regulations. There are currently 14 special management areas in Tonga, which enhances coastal and community fisheries. In conclusion, regional and sub-regional economic integration, therefore, has become a more viable strategy for pursuing and realizing the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. Chairman, I strongly believe that the outcomes that will emanate from this 73rd UN ESCAP will be pivotal to our achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. I thank you, Chairman Barrow.
Excellency, thank you. Thank you for your statement, Excellency. And I would like all the speakers to keep an eye on the time count as well. And next on my list is His Excellency His Excellency Mr. Arshil Julia Chevili, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of Georgia to the Republic of India. The floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, at the outset allow me to highlight Georgia's recent achievements and successes in the regional integration and cooperation. One of the main attractiveness of Georgia is its strategic location. The regional transit roads from north to south and east to west. We are positioning our country as a regional transit hub for goods transportation. Contribution to the development of the international transit corridors is one of the priorities of the Georgian government that requires close regional cooperation. Georgia has free trade agreements with the European Union, Azerbaijan, Turkey, Armenia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Moldova, Ukraine, and Belarus. A few days ago, free trade agreement with China was signed, which will be open a new avenue for increased cooperation. And it's on the good example for regional cooperation. Main pillars for the Georgia's regional cooperation are the transport, energy, communication, and the tourism fields. Georgia has a well-developed transport infrastructure, which allows transportation of goods by all kinds of carriers, air, land, maritime, pipeline, transitional lines. In order to utilize the existing transit potential at its maximum extent, ensure capacity growth of cargo flow, as well as the reduction of delivery time, Government of Georgia modernized national transport infrastructure and attractively participates in a number of multilateral, multinational, large-scale projects. Energy became a component which shapes the geopolitics of the wider Eurasian region to a greater extent. These vast energy resources of South Caucasus and Central Asia creates new opportunities for cooperation among energy producers, transit, and consumer countries across the region. Georgia, in chain with our partners, in a logical bridge linking energy-rich Caspian region to the major consumers. Having such a strategic location, Georgia is well-positioned to host oil and gas transportation projects of the international and regional dimension. We proved that Georgia is a reliable and sustainable transit partner, and we have an intention to enforce our transit potential in the future. In coming months, a new railway connection with Turkey will be finalized, which will connect Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey, as well as the Central Asian countries via Caspian Sea. Also, Georgia is constructing new Anakle deep sea port on the Black Sea for enhancing regional cooperation and facilitation of goods of movement from Asia to Europe. The Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan and the Baku-Subsa pipelines, as well the Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum gas pipeline, are already successfully delivering Caspian hydrocarbon resources to the West. Apart from this project, Georgia is engaged in a number of initiatives, which has particular importance. We are greatly contributing to finding solutions for global energy challenges. In line with our sustainable energy strategy, Georgia significantly promoting clean energy production in the region. This certainly adds core value to the role of being the supplier of oil and the gas, hydrocarbons, complementing it with the renewable resources that can be supplied to the markets. We aim to become the regional leader in green energy production. One of the priorities of the Georgian government is to cover entire territory with fiber optic network, which will enhance the connectivity between the regions of Georgia, and we are developing fiber optic connection with our neighboring countries in order to create possibility of fast transmission of data through internet. To address the major concern of the regional and global challenges, multilateral framework of cooperation is important. Therefore, it's our common interest that new platform cooperation alongside with the existing ones will be not only instrumental for enhancing each and every country's natural advantages, but would also strengthen the security and sustainable development dimensions for the wider Eurasia region. In our global responsibility to join international and regional initiatives and outline solutions through multilateral efficient cooperation. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. And now on my list is Ms. Chua Susan, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Singapore. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The Singapore delegation would like to express our appreciation to the United Nations ESCAP for organizing the 73rd session of the ESCAP Commission and to the Government of Thailand for its warm hospitality. Mr. Chairman, energy demand continues to grow globally and regionally. With the effects of climate change becoming more apparent, the pursuit of sustainable energy is thus vital to mitigate the environmental impact of this rising energy demand. Due to Singapore's physical constraints as a highly urbanized city-state with limited natural resources, Singapore has always placed sustainable development at the core of our policies. Since we lack access to alternative energy options, a key focus is improving our energy efficiency. We recently announced a carbon tax, which will provide a price signal on GHG emissions to incentivize businesses to improve their energy efficiency. Despite our small size and high urban density, we strive to increase adoption of solar energy through innovative projects such as floating photovoltaic systems on our reservoirs and our Solar Nova program that aggregates solar demand across government agencies. Mr. Chairman, pursuing sustainable energy remains a difficult task. Countries, including Singapore, may face an energy trilemma, where trade-offs are required among economic competitiveness, energy security, and environmental sustainability. Through regional cooperation, countries can address common challenges, find new solutions, and share useful practices. Singapore is committed to promoting sustainable energy in our region. In Southeast Asia, regional initiatives like the ASEAN Power Grid and the Trans-ASEAN Gas Pipeline will allow more effective deployment and utilization of energy resources. The Energy Market Authority of Singapore also worked with ESCAP to co-organize the inaugural Energy Access Forum at the Singapore International Energy Week 2016 to discuss how the Asia-Pacific region could progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 7 of ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. In addition, Singapore is developing and deploying cutting-edge technologies for sustainable energy that serve the region. To develop renewable energy integration and microgrid solutions that can serve the rapidly growing microgrid markets in Asia-Pacific, we launched the Renewable Energy Integration Demonstrator in 2014, which is Southeast Asia's first major microgrid testbed. This has developed strong traction amongst regional adapters, including projects in Indonesia and the Philippines. Under the Singapore Cooperation Program, we have shared our experience on clean energy and emissions reductions with officials from fellow developing countries. In collaboration with the International Energy Association, we will be hosting a new regional energy training hub to develop industry-specific capabilities in the region. ESCAP provides various useful platforms for intra-regional cooperation on energy and sustainable development. Singapore will continue to participate constructively in discussions and seek opportunities with ESCAP and its member countries to build a sustainable future. Thank you.
Ambassador, thank you for your statement, and also thank you for keeping to the time. The next speaker on my list is His Excellency Mr. Murad Yasinbayev, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative to ESCAP from Kazakhstan. The podium is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. First of all, on behalf of the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan, I would like to express gratitude to the United Nations ESCAP for excellent arrangements in this session. The topic we discussed at this session is very relevant. Kazakhstan, like other countries, faces impacts of external factors, instability of global financial and trade markets. For the purpose of inclusive and sustainable development, it's important to consolidate mutual efforts to strengthen interaction and form new efficient tools to increase economic cooperation between countries of the region. In this regard, the 2017 Agenda for Sustainable Development is truly a global guide for development and prosperity. The primary responsibility for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal rests with the national governments. Our response to the current challenges is a strategic program document of Kazakhstan. Recently, President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, announced 5 main priorities as part of Kazakhstan's third modernization. The priorities are aimed at ensuring economic growth and supporting the country to become one of the top 30 most developed countries in the world by 2050. The 5 priorities are acceleration of technological modernization of the economy, improved business environment, macroeconomic stability, improved quality of human capital, and institutional reforms, include improved security and more action to tackle corruption. Mr. Chairman, strategic program documents of Kazakhstan, for instance, Strategy 2050, are consistent with the Sustainable Development Goals. The theme of SDG as a key element of regional peace and security is being promoted by our country during the non-permanent membership in the United Nations Security Council. As President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev has stressed in his policy address to the UN Security Council, we are convinced that long-term stability and sustainable peace can only be achieved by understanding the strong connection between peace, security, and development. This security development nexus should be based on global action to prevent wars and conflicts, protect human rights, deliver sustainable development goals, and combat climate change, including through implementation of commitments by all parties to the Paris Climate Agreement. Mr. Chairman, Kazakhstan, being the largest landlocked country in the world, attaches a great importance to the WIN program of action Kazakhstan is focused on addressing challenges of isolation from global markets and limited access to international trade that are among major obstacles on our way to sustainable development. In this regard, Kazakhstan believes that regional economic integration offers great potential to overcome natural limitations of landlocked country. We see great benefits in the functioning of the Eurasian Economic Union and looking forward to deepen and broaden economic cooperation with other countries in Asia and the Pacific. One of the good examples of such as cooperation is the integration of Kazakhstani Nurli-Zhol program and China Belt and Road Initiative. Both projects seek to create conditions for trade facilitation, transit transportation, and development of reliable transport and logistic infrastructure. Therefore, integration of this project creates a multiplying effects for the development and wide range of industries and unimpeded trade across the Eurasian continent. Today, we are making great efforts to maximize the transit potential of Kazakhstan. A number of infrastructure projects are being implemented in the road, railway, and aviation industries. The implementation of transport projects will make it possible to fully tap the potential of the main transit roads passing through Kazakhstan, such as Western Europe, Western China, Russia, Central Asia, and China, Iran. Mr. Chairman, this year we marks the 25th anniversary of Kazakhstan membership in the United Nations. Over the last quarter century, our country has shown its full commitment to the purpose and objectives of the UN Charter. Kazakhstan was the first country from Central Asia to hold a seat in the UN Security Council. Currently, 21 UN agencies, programs, and funds operate in Kazakhstan, including ESCAP Sub-Regional Office for North and Central Asia. Recognizing the location of Kazakhstan and its role in the region, we are proposed to create the UN Regional Hub in Almaty city, which will fill up a geographical gap between UN centers in Istanbul and Bangkok, and will give a notable support to Central Asia and Eurasia as well. Mr. Chairman, Kazakhstan is determined to continue its contribution to sustainable development. In the light of the recent ratification of the Paris Agreement, the theme Future Energy of the large-scale exhibition Expo 2017 is highly relevant. The exhibition will attract the best world technology in the field of energy saving, new developments and technology of using alternative energy sources. Moreover, we expect the Expo will become a catalyst for developing fundamentally new approaches for sustainable development of our country, based on the principle of global interdependence and shared responsibility for the fate of our planet. As a legacy of the exhibition, it's planned to open in the International Center for the Development of Green Technology and Investment Projects under the auspices of the United Nations. The center will be a regional and international hub for the development and expansion of green technology for sustainable growth. Infrastructure and facilities of Expo 2070 will also be used for the Astana International Financial Center. During the Expo 2070, Astana will host the 8th International Forum of Energy for Sustainable Development together with Energy Ministerial. We are cordially invited all states to participate in this event. Kazakhstan is working on the implementation of the National Plan for Transition of Green Economy. We are also committed to supporting sustainable development through our initiative, Green Bridge Partnership Program. Using this opportunity, we call upon the countries of the Asia-Pacific region to take an active part in this Green Bridge Partnership Program. Kazakhstan is closely working with ESCAP on green economy. Together with ESCAP, Kazakhstan launched a project to install biogas system in small island developing states of the Pacific region. Kazakhstan is planning further to continue supporting ESCAP's projects on climate changes and renewable energy solutions in the region, with a key focus on helping Pacific Island countries to participate more actively in international climate change meetings. In conclusion, With a view to generate innovation and develop technology, we once again put forward the proposal of the President of Kazakhstan to all member states to allocate 1% of their defense budget to the Special Fund of the United Nations for Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your statement. And next is His Excellency Mr. Kwong Il-no, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary, Republic of Korea. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, distinguished representatives, ladies and gentlemen, let me begin by thanking the UN ESCAP Secretariat and the Government of Thailand for the excellent preparations for the 73rd session of the Commission. The 23rd Agenda for Sustainable Development requires the international community to make concerted efforts in order to build a human society that leaves no one behind, and indeed a future for the planet where nature and humankind coexist in harmony. And the Paris Agreement calls on the international community to make the transition to the low-carbon economy as a new economic model for the future. At this context, selecting regional cooperation for sustainable energy as the theme of this session is indeed timely. Energy cooperation is Sustainable Development Goal 7, and at the same time, it can work as a key mechanism for implementation of the Paris Agreement. Mr. Chairman, the Asia-Pacific region faces multiple energy security challenges as it comprises countries facing a range of different situations in the energy field, including a number of energy exporting countries, the Northeast Asian countries which rely heavily on energy imports, the Southeast Asian countries which still rely heavily on fossil fuels, and the Pacific Island groups which are vulnerable to climate change. In order to overcome such vulnerabilities in regional energy security today, I'd like to emphasize the importance of all members making the transition to a low-carbon economy and enhancing energy connectivity in the Asia-Pacific region. First of all, for the transition to the low-carbon economy, all countries need to bring change in the energy paradigm, expanding the renewable energy supply. Korea has strived to secure reliable energy sources for sustainable development while actively participating in the international efforts to combat climate change in keeping with the Paris Agreement, with its mitigation target of reducing greenhouse gases by 37% by 2030. At the domestic level, the Korean government set a midterm energy strategy mostly based on the development of new energy technology. Through this strategy, we plan to expand the proportion of renewable energy to 11% by 2035. Most of all, in accordance with the new energy industry strategy for 2030 announced in 2015, Korea plans to create a new business model which takes ICT and eco-friendly energy resources as a basis by intensively fostering 4 industries: the energy prosumer electricity market, expansion of low-carbon generation, wide distribution of electric vehicles, and eco-friendly technology development. In accordance with this strategy, Korea is actively embarking on energy technology development. Key examples include the development of energy-independent islands, which could generate enough electricity for the population through clean and renewable energy sources, and the expansion of a smart grid which aims to achieve an interconnected power grid intended to optimize energy efficiency. At the international level, Korea is participating in the Mission Innovation, which aims to double the public R&D budget for cleaner energy over the next 5 years. Korea envisages that Mission Innovation can serve to develop clean energy technology innovation and the transition to the low-carbon economy. Second, in order to enhance the energy connectivity in the Asia-Pacific region, facilitating consultations between the countries of the region is imperative. Since 2013, Korea and UN ESCAP have jointly held the Northeast Asian Energy Security Forum. Recently, the fourth forum held in December 2016 under the theme of facilitating Northeast Asian power grid interconnections served as an excellent opportunity to share our thoughts on the possibilities for enhancing regional energy connectivity and energy security. The aim of this initiative is to integrate the regional power grids to supply sustainable energy to neighboring countries by harnessing the vast potential of renewable energy, such as wind power in Mongolia and Siberia. Enhanced regional energy connectivity through extensive power grid interconnections in particular will be an impetus to enhance countries' energy efficiency. Finally, I wish to emphasize the importance of financing for sustainable energy and for sustainable development in Asia-Pacific region as a whole. Development financing is a key instrument for actual implementation of the SDGs. Given this, it is crucial that we enhance regional collective efforts to mobilize finance for sustainable energy cooperation in the region. As the Asia-Pacific region has been a driving force for global economic growth, financing and investment in this region are constantly on the increase, and the capital market is rapidly growing. However, the development gap between upper-middle-income countries and the least developed countries has been the most conspicuous in this region. Therefore, active discussions and cooperation are needed for effective mobilization of financing for sustainable energy cooperation in the region. In particular, the infrastructure development which is needed for renewable energy supply and energy integration in the region demands all kinds of financial resources, including both public and private financing. Public financing has an important role to play in promoting private investment. In this regard, I'd like to stress the importance of the role of Green Climate Fund as a central financial mechanism for addressing climate change and sustainable development in developing countries. Mr. Chairman, in this region of differing levels of economic development, ESCAP has indeed been playing a facilitating role in promoting regional cooperation in the economic and social sectors for the last 70 years. I have every confidence that ESCAP will indeed play a pivotal role in facilitating regional cooperation in the energy area and fostering valuable partnerships for sustainable development in the region. As a key member and the greatest donor of ESCAP, the Republic of Korea would like to reaffirm its sincere wish to continue to cooperate with other members and the ESCAP Secretariat for sustainable development in the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you.
Excellency, thank you for your statement. And now we have His Excellency Mr. Bakwan Singh Bishnoi, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative to ESCAP from India. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I congratulate you on your election as chair of the session. The topic of discussion is relevant in terms of reaffirming the basic concept that countries and peoples cannot become developed or stay developed in isolation. Regional cooperation is critical for development, particularly for it to be quick and resilient. Mr. Chairman, India's high continued growth rates, which are in excess of 7%, have made it one of the fastest growing economies in the world. This, despite global uncertainty and a less friendly environment for openness and multilateralism. The Government of India remains focused on achieving high economic growth rates going up to 9%. India's development transformation includes a mapping of SDGs to specific national programs, priorities and targets, and of tailoring them to India's development needs. The government has also been active in raising awareness and capacity for subnational SDG integration into state and local government plans. The government has, at the same time, developed a series of draft national SDG indicators. Mr. Chairman, India is fully cognizant that environmental sustainability, sustainable energy, and water security must be key factors in supporting its increased population and faster development. At the same time, under the Paris Agreement for climate change, India will reduce by 1/3 its GDP energy intensity by 2030 and increase renewable energy grid contributions to 175 gigawatts of electricity by 2022. Mr. Chairman, the Government of India is actively supporting regional cooperation initiatives to improve energy infrastructure connectivity and energy market interactions. India recognizes the strong gains for utilizing supply-demand complementarities through trade, cross-border investments, and technical cooperation, particularly by addressing energy through electricity. India supports initiatives towards a South Asia power grid and a South Asia market for electricity trade. India has also committed itself to global leadership in transforming renewable energy industries through the International Solar Alliance to increase cooperation in renewable energy technologies, knowledge, and best practices. The Government of India has recognized the importance of improved multimodal transport connectivity links and is committed to active cooperation to develop the two Southern Central Asia trunk corridors identified by ESCAP as integral parts of the Asia Highway. In digital connectivity, India's Digital India campaign is committed to creating a digital infrastructure network across the country, which can be complemented by investment in coordinated and cooperative digital linkages with neighboring member states. Application of the ESCAP-led initiative for the Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway to increase the availability and affordability of broadband internet across the region would directly support this government priority. The government also remains committed to the regional integrated multi-hazard early warning system. I would like to make particular mention that under the Act East policy, we are pursuing the trilateral India-Myanmar-Thailand highway project. Under our Neighborhood First policy, we are developing multimodal linkages with Myanmar and Bangladesh. Under our Go West strategy, we are engaged with Iran on the Chabhar port and with Iran and other partners in Central Asia on the International North-South Transport Corridor. The BBIN, or Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal initiative, is enhancing logistic efficiencies in the South Asian region. We are actively considering acceding to the TIR Convention. While India welcomes integration and connectivity in the region, we are of the firm belief that connectivity initiatives must be based on universally recognized international norms, good governance, rule of law, openness, transparency, and equality. Connectivity initiatives must follow principles of financial responsibility to avoid projects that would create unsustainable debt burden for communities, of balanced ecological and environmental protection, of transparency in assessment of project costs, and of skill and technology transfer to help long-term running and maintenance of the assets created by local communities. Connectivity projects must also be pursued in a manner that respects sovereignty and territorial integrity. Mr. Chairman, the Government of India is host to the ESCAP Sub-Regional Office for South and Southwest Asia and also the Asia-Pacific Center for Technology Transfer in New Delhi. We take this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to increased delivery by ESCAP of concrete actions in keeping with its mandate. Mr. Chairman, India looks forward to increased cooperation with the member states of ESCAP. We believe that the countries of Asia and the Pacific can be an example to other regions by coherent regional cooperation for more inclusive and more sustained development for our peoples. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excellency, thank you for your statement. And now we have Ms. Octavia Bortwick, Permanent Representative to ESCAP from Australia. Madam, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Australia is again very grateful for Thailand's hosting of the 73rd Commission and for Dr. Shamshad Akhtar and the ESCAP Secretariat's continuing support to Member States in pursuing the goals of the 2030 Agenda. Australia welcomes the 2030 Agenda as the long-term roadmap for global development, and we actively seek opportunities to advance the agenda in the Asia-Pacific region. ESCAP's 2017 Economic and Social Survey identifies good governance, particularly fiscal management, as critical for development in the region. Governance affects virtually all aspects of a country's prosperity. That is why Australia is committing $806 million, over 1/5 of our aid budget, to strengthening governance in our region, including public sector and financial management reforms, political governance, and human rights. Promoting good governance and stronger democratic institutions is one of the key pillars of Australia's candidacy for the UN Human Rights Council in 2018. We will focus on helping to build institutions that promote stability, inclusive economic growth and poverty reduction, ensure disability inclusiveness, and strengthen gender equality and women's empowerment. Domestically, the Australian government is implementing initiatives that go to the heart of the SDGs, including new policies to reduce domestic violence, closing the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, and the National Disability Insurance Scheme. In line with the Commission's theme for this year, sustainable energy is also a focus for Australia. In the transition to a lower emissions future, the Australian energy system is undergoing profound change, driven by economic, engineering and environmental considerations. While Australia places a high priority on the reliability and affordability of energy supply, we also aim to reduce emissions by 26 to 28% by 2030, based on 2005 levels. Our National Energy Productivity Plan aims to deliver a 40% improvement in energy productivity by 2030, driven by smarter consumer choices and better energy services. For example, by improving light vehicle efficiency and compliance with building energy efficiency regulation. Australia's renewable energy target will contribute to our 2020 and 2030 emission reduction commitments. It is a market-based mechanism for supporting renewable energy power stations such as wind and solar farms, and is expected to increase the share of renewables to around 23.5% of Australia's electricity use by 2020. Technology will underpin our low emissions transformation. Australia is preparing a low emissions technology roadmap that identifies opportunities and barriers to research, as well as development and take-up of new and emerging energy technologies. Australia is also working regionally and globally to progress energy sustainability and environmental goals. Through the APEC Energy Working Group, Australia and other APEC members are aiming to reduce regional energy intensity by 45% by 2035, with 2005 as a base year, and promoting a doubling of renewable energy in the region by 2030. We are working to support our neighbours in the region to have access to reliable energy, which is vital for businesses and for communities, which is why energy infrastructure is a key focus of our aid program's wider economic infrastructure development strategy. For instance, Australia is proud to be supporting Tonga to reach its renewable energy goals and climate change targets through the Outer Islands Renewable Energy Project, contributing $5.7 million towards the project in co-financing with the Asian Development Bank and the European Union. Australia's business partnerships platforms enables businesses to collaborate with the Australian government on investments that deliver combined social and financial returns. For example, in Papua New Guinea, we partner with mobile communication company Digicel to provide access to affordable and reliable solar energy to off-grid households and small businesses, helping them to better participate in the digital economy. It's crucial that our region's future leaders build their links and understanding of our diverse region. Around 17,500 Australian undergraduate students have already participated in the first 4 years of Australia's New Colombo Plan. They are studying and working in over 35 countries in the Indo-Pacific and becoming more Asia literate, an investment which will boost regional productivity, prosperity and connectivity. Australian mining and energy companies, including Woodside and Oil Search, are champions of the New Colombo Plan, providing students with work experience opportunities in their offshore operations. Australia is an ocean nation surrounded by the Indian, Southern and Pacific Oceans. We take seriously our responsibility to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas and marine resources, and we are a partner in many regional initiatives. Given how critically important oceans and SDG 14 are to our neighbourhood's collective future, we support the calls for our region's views to be heard at the upcoming UN Ocean Conference, including through ESCAP's work. We are pleased to co-sponsor Fiji's resolution on SDG Goal 14 this year to that end. Implementation of SDG 14 and the wider 2030 agenda is not just a commitment by governments. The intention behind this transformative and ambitious agenda is that far-reaching and sustainable development must be inclusive and involve all relevant players, including civil society, business and academia. The implementation must also harness all sources of development finance, both traditional and non-traditional. This means using our existing resources and limited budgets to catalyse other financial flows and fill financing gaps in vulnerable countries, such as the small island developing states and the least developed countries. The 2030 Agenda challenges us all to reflect on what we each need to do and how we work together towards achieving the SDGs. We look forward to continuing Australia's partnership with other member states and the ESCAP Secretariat, working together to achieve the 2030 Agenda's vision of prosperity, sustainability and opportunity in the Asia Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. And now we have Mr. Zaung, Director General, Oil and Gas Planning Department, Myanmar. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, on behalf of the Myanmar delegation, I am truly honored to have the opportunity to attend this important section, and I would like to express our sincere thanks to the UN ESCAP for the excellent arrangements made for this meeting. Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Nowadays, sustainable energy becomes a global issue, and all the governments are working for securing the energy supply in the sustainable ways. In this declaration, the Commission adopted the themes for this year as regional cooperation for the sustainable energy, which can bring our attention on strengthening cooperation in tackling the common challenges. So Myanmar is actively participating in the regional cooperation activities, such as ASEAN, BIMSTEC, ECMEC, LMI, and so on. Currently, Myanmar is one of the lowest energy consumption countries in the region. So, however, we are continuously working for the energy sector development. We are targeting to achieve the 100% electrification by 2030, and having this opportunity, I would like to update the progress of Myanmar energy sector situation. As you all are aware, Myanmar economy has been growing rapidly since a few years ago, and obviously, sustainable energy supply becomes a basic requirement and challenge in order to keep the pace of the country's economic growth. During the last year, so overall electrification rate reached 37% with an increase of 3.24% to electricity access. So however, our national goal is to have a universal access by 2030, and which means we need more effort to do. So recently, a state councillor of the Myanmar also reaffirmed that the transportation and electricity will continue to play a key role in driving the sustainable economic growth. So nevertheless, the government can't accomplish this task by alone. So therefore, we are expanding the regional and international energy cooperation activities and also creating the opportunity for a private sector participation. So we are modeling and working with our development partners from the international communities, and we are learning the international practices and developing the possible approaches. The study also includes the application of the latest innovative solution such as LNG. So on the other hand, we are strengthening our energy supply by using our own natural resources, including the hydrocarbon and other sources such as hydro, solar, wind, and biomass. So we recently enacted the new investment law, and we are also working for the further improvement of the investment climate, including the strengthening of the regulatory framework and formulating the energy pricing policy. Our government has an ambitious goal for the country's energy sector development. So finally, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the ESCAP for assisting the sustainable development of the Myanmar with many opportunities. These include the capacity building and the technical assistance of the Myanmar civil servants for many years, in collaboration between the UCSB and ESCAP Institute, ABCICT, series of workshops for the continuous series of workshops has been undertaken. So in addition, Myanmar wishes to inform the Executive Secretary of the ESCAP and the UN ESCAP, the 73rd section of the Commission, on the decision of the Cabinet to host the 3rd Asia-Pacific Water Summit and to invite all member states to actively participate in the summit in Yangon, Myanmar, tentatively planned to hold in around February 2018. So Myanmar wishes to thank the Governing Council and the Regional Expert Network of the Asia-Pacific Water Forum for substantial organizational support. In closing, I would like to thank UN ESCAP for the continuous support to the inclusive and sustainable development of the Myanmar. Thank you all.
Mr. Ong, thank you for keeping the time, and thank you for your statement. And now we have Ms. Zakia Bint Jafar, Director, Macroeconomic Section, Prime Minister's Economic Planning Unit. Madam, you have the floor now.
Honorable Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Malaysian delegation, let me first express our appreciation to the ESCAP Secretariat and to the host country, Kingdom of Thailand, for the excellent meeting arrangement and hospitality. Since its global adoption in 2015, Malaysia continues to be committed in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and ensuring the achievement of the SDGs. I am pleased to say that the Agenda 2030 has been successfully institutionalized into our national development planning mechanism and plans. We are currently in the process of formulating a national SDG roadmap towards achieving these aspirations. Stakeholder engagement has been conducted to obtain feedback and validation from various stakeholders. Given the progress we have made thus far, Malaysia has registered to participate in the voluntary national review at the high-level political forum on sustainable development later in the year, along with 40 other countries. Mr. Chairman, the theme of the 73rd session of ESCAP on regional cooperation for sustainable energy is an apt one, as affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy is an indispensable enabler of economic growth and development. In the past, Malaysia has focused more on ensuring the security of energy supply with some efforts to enhance renewable energy as an alternative source, complemented with some energy efficiency measures. During the 11 Malaysia Plan period of 2016 to 2020, Malaysia has undertaken a paradigm shift. While energy security and renewable energy will continue to be given focus, demand-side management that incorporates more energy efficiency and conservation measures will be implemented to ensure sustainable management of energy sources. A comprehensive demand-side management master plan is currently being drawn up, covering the entire spectrum of the energy sector, and is expected to bring significant cost benefits through prudent management of energy resources. Since 2008, the Malaysian government began embarking on an energy subsidy rationalization exercise to increase economic efficiency, where energy subsidies were gradually reduced and retail fuel prices were gradually liberalized. In parallel with these efforts, a mitigation plan in the form of targeted cash transfer program was initiated to lessen the burden of the resulting higher cost of living on low-income households. Moving forward, I am pleased to also share that we have just launched the Malaysia Green Technology Master Plan covering the period 2017 to 2030. This is a strategic plan and implementation framework to catalyze green growth towards sustainable development and to position Malaysia as a green technology hub by the year 2030. Among the targets set under this master plan is to achieve the 40% carbon intensity reduction by 2020 and to improve the quality of life of the people. Mr. Chairman, Malaysia recognizes the potential of cross-border elements in the form of energy-power interconnection, where indigenous resources in each country could be shared via the prescribed interconnection modality. The ASEAN Regional Economic Grouping provides such energy collaboration under the platform of the ASEAN Minister on Energy meetings, which leverage on the cooperation among utility authorities and the analytical capability of the ASEAN Regional Energy Centre. In principle, Malaysia welcomes well-crafted energy system transition pathways that would ensure the energy security requirement remain intact while increasing regional connectivity by leveraging on the ASEAN energy platform. If, however, a greater scope is required, Malaysia also welcomes all effort to hasten such regional collaboration within ESCAP. Mr. Chairman, I thank you.
Ms. Zakia, thank you for your statement. And now we have Mr. Bruno Lukorkin, Director, Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office in Singapore. Mr. Kin, you have the floor now.
Your Excellency, Mr. Chairman, Executive Secretary, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Hong Kong China delegation, I would like to congratulate the government of Thailand and the ESCAP Secretariat on the very successful organization of this meeting. I'm also grateful to the government and people of Thailand for the very warm hospitality extended to us. I would like to begin my remarks with a brief overview of Hong Kong's economy. Our economy grew by 1.9% for 2016 as a whole. Economic growth picked up successfully over the course of the year, riding on improvements in external economic environment and resilience in domestic demand. Looking ahead, an improving global economy should continue to render support to Hong Kong's export performance, including inbound tourism and services exports in the near term. However, uncertainties in the external environment still abound, including those associated with the US interest rate normalization, Brexit, and other political developments in Europe, possible rise of the protectionist sentiment, as well as heightened geopolitical tensions in various regions. Barring any significant negative shocks from the external front, the Hong Kong economy should be able to attain growth of 2.2 to 3% in 2017. Hong Kong cannot agree more that regional cooperation is essential to ensuring sustainable energy in the countries and economies in the region. I would like to take this opportunity to share with you Hong Kong's experiences in decarbonizing the energy sector and promoting low-carbon development in our effort to combat the adverse impact of climate change. In November 2016, the Paris Agreement came into force in record time. It is unprecedented that a multilateral treaty received such resounding support from so many governments to make this happen in less than a year. This reflects the importance everyone attaches to climate change. The global task now is to embark on actions to formulate action plans and roadmaps for us to work towards the 2-degree goal. The Hong Kong government has worked hard in the past year to review past efforts and to push ahead with new carbon emission reduction target for 2030 and action plans to meet the target. On the basis of this thorough review, we published in January this year the Climate Action Plan 2030+. This action plan sets out for Hong Kong a new carbon reduction target to reduce carbon intensity by 65% to 70% by 2030 using 2005 as the base, which is equivalent to an absolute reduction of 26 to 36% and resulting in a per capita emission of 3.3 to 3.8 tons in 2030. To achieve this ambitious target, we'll continue to phase down coal in local electricity generation, optimize the implementation of renewable energy, and make our buildings and infrastructure more energy efficient. As electricity generation accounts for almost 70% of Hong Kong's carbon emissions, to achieve the new target, we need to phase down coal-fired electricity generation in the next decade or so. That is to replace the majority of the coal-fired generation units by cleaner energy sources by 2030 to reduce carbon emissions. This approach will have a significant impact on electricity tariff. A consensus in the society will be required for us to achieve the carbon reduction target for 2030. In addition, the government will further promote energy saving and the development of renewable energy. Hong Kong does not have favorable conditions for large-scale commercialized renewable energy generation. We only have a land of 1,106 square kilometers, much of which is hilly terrain. Our territorial waters are also limited. However, we do have modest renewable energy potential, and we apply renewable energy from wind, solar, and waste to energy on a wider and larger scale in the immediate years ahead, based on mature and commercially available technologies, with the public sector taking the lead. The government will continue to champion the adoption of renewable energy and has earmarked about $25.6 million for provision of renewable energy installations in government buildings and venues, as well as community facilities, and set higher targets for government buildings in the use of renewable energy. Hong Kong is already on a committed path to turn waste into energy. The energy arising from sludge treatment is already used, and landfill gas usage is being expanded. Currently, the largest waste-to-energy facility, called the T-Park, reduces the volume of dewatered sewage sludge by 90%, and the heat generated by the incineration process is used to generate electricity to meet on-site operational needs. The surplus electricity is exported to the power grid for meeting the needs of up to 4,000 homes, possibly by 2030. Energy will be captured from the first Organic Resource Recovery Center, scheduled to open towards the end of 2017. And the second plant is being planned for commissioning by 2021. A large-scale waste-to-energy plant to treat municipal solid waste is expected to be operational by 2024, which can supply about 480 gigawatt-hour of surplus electricity each year. That equates to the usage of about 100,000 households. Thus, by 2030, the waste-to-energy projects are expected to provide about 1.5% of Hong Kong's total electricity needs. As for landfill gas, all the 3 existing strategic landfills have been utilizing landfill gas for electricity and thermal energy production for on-site users. We expect that by the end of this year, around 70 to 80% of the landfill gas collected from the 3 landfills will be utilized beneficially. We're also working to create the conditions to facilitate the private sector adopting renewable energy. Promotion of renewable energy will be a key focus of the new scheme of control agreement with the power companies, which will commence upon expiry of the current agreements in 2018. Feed-in tariff and renewable energy certificates are two important renewable energy initiatives to be introduced. Feed-in tariff should help encourage the private sector to reconsider investing in renewable energy, such as solar photovoltaic systems, as the power generated can be sold to power companies at a rate higher than the normal electricity tariff to cover the cost of investment in the renewable energy systems and generation. At the same time, renewable energy certificates will be sold by power companies for units of electricity from renewable energy sources, whether such electricity is generated or purchased by the power companies, such that buyers can claim their operation or activities that are carbon-free. The revenue from these RE certificates will be used to help alleviate the overall tariff impact on all consumers brought about by the introduction of the feed-in tariff scheme. The new agreement will also encompass incentive schemes to encourage the power companies to develop RE and facilitate the development of distributed renewable energy. There are about 50,000 buildings in Hong Kong, about 8,000 of which are owned and managed by the government. As electricity used in buildings accounts for about 90% of the total electricity consumption in Hong Kong, energy efficiency in buildings is the most critical means to continuously reduce carbon emissions. The government promulgated the Energy Saving Plan for Hong Kong's building environment 2015 to 2025 plus, which sets the target of reducing Hong Kong's energy intensity by 40% by 2025. To promote energy saving in buildings, we have taken steps on multiple fronts. The government has been leading the example in energy savings in buildings. We have set a target of 5% saving in electricity consumption of government buildings from 2015 to 2016 to 2019 to 2020 under a comparable operating conditions in 2013 to 2014. To achieve this target, a series of measures have been introduced, including energy audits to identify energy management opportunities. At least $64 million has been earmarked to gradually implement the electricity saving projects in the next 5 years, starting in financial year 2017 to 18. We also invest in energy efficiency infrastructure. The government has implemented the first of this kind district cooling system at a place called Kai Tak Development, which is an area being redeveloped following a relocation of the airport. The entire DCS project is estimated to cost $634 million. Compared with traditional air-cooled air conditioning systems and individual water-cooled air conditioning systems, the DCS consumes 35% to 20% less electricity respectively. We expect the DCS in the Kai Tak development will achieve an annual electricity saving of 85 million kilowatt-hour with a corresponding annual reduction of 59,500 tons of carbon dioxide emissions upon completion. We'll consider the provision of DCS in new development areas and redevelopment areas to foster low-carbon development. On the regulatory front, the government has implemented legislation called the Buildings Energy Efficiency Ordinance to require central building services installations in newly constructed buildings and buildings undergoing major renovations to meet the minimum energy efficiency standards. The building energy standards are reviewed every 3 years to reflect the development of international standards and latest technological advancement. The first review was completed in 2015, and the new standards have already been taken effect. The new standards are expected to bring about an accumulative energy saving of 5 billion kilowatt-hour by 2025, equivalent to a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions of about 3.5 million tons. Turning to encouraging an energy saving in the private sector, the government has established a partnership with major stakeholders in the building environment under the 4T framework, namely target, timeline, transparency, and togetherness. The partnership currently includes property developers, property management companies, hotels, utility companies, and professional organizations, and will include more such as schools and retailers as it grows. It provides a platform to encourage stakeholders to operationalize the Paris Agreement and exchange energy-saving practices and experiences. We have encouraged the 4T partners to set their own energy-saving targets and timelines and to share with others their energy-saving measures. Promotion of energy efficiency and conservation will be another key focus of the new scheme of control agreements. Under the new agreement, existing incentive schemes to promote energy efficiency and conservation will be expanded while the new measures will be introduced. The Energy Efficiency Fund will be expanded to support retrofitting and retro-commissioning of a wide coverage of buildings, including the implementation of building-based smart or IT technologies to enhance energy efficiency. A new community energy saving fund will be established to support energy efficiency and conservation programs, such as encouraging customers to replace or upgrade their electricity appliances to more energy efficient models, as well as supporting green building initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, the Paris Agreement has called for global action to achieve the 2-degree target and requires us to review our action every 5 years to adopt new actions. This provides the right momentum to stimulate governments to keep tracking efforts and pushing forward continuously. The Hong Kong government is committed to our action plan, but we need the people to be engaged. And we are glad that many business leaders and members of the public take climate change seriously, as we need their support for enhancing Hong Kong's climate readiness. A key aspect of which is to use natural resources, including energy, much more efficiently and to adopt a new low-carbon lifestyle. Only then can we have a chance to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I look forward to closer cooperation with ESCAP members in decarbonizing the energy sector. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Lu Korking, thank you. Mr. Lu Korking from Hong Kong, China. Thank you for your statement. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the conclusion of the deliberations on this agenda item for this morning. May I now request the Secretariat to make housekeeping announcement? Mr. Mitch, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to everybody. I want to start with a bit of a schedule change. As we all know, this afternoon session will resume at 2:30, but rather than take a break once the country statements are over and resume at 4 o'clock, I would like to just inform everybody we plan to go straight on through. So we have about an hour's worth of country statements, well, not even an hour's worth of country statements, and we will then continue with the rest of the agenda, which covers other matters, agenda item 11, and then adoption of the report, agenda item 12. So there will be no longer a break. We will not be resuming at 4. We will start at 2:30 and proceed throughout the rest of the agenda until we finish with the adoption of the report. To assist you in all of that, I hope you have been checking the ACPR webpage. All of the documents for the session for adoption are available. The report of the Commission, the draft resolutions, the draft decisions, they are all available on the Commission website. If you have problems accessing that, please get in touch with your liaison officers. They should have your temporary password and login information. I have a quick reminder about our assessment of the Commission. As we have been mandated by the Commission, Secretariat has been systematically carrying out survey questionnaires of the conference structure at each of its meetings. In this connection, as I announced the other day, an evaluation questionnaire has been provided to each delegation. Earlier this morning, I was told we've only received feedback from 4 delegations. So I would encourage you all to please complete the evaluation. Let us know how we're doing. This does help us to make further improvements to serve you and the meetings better in the future. All of the evaluations can be placed in a box at the back of this room. And then lastly, as we adjourn here, there will be one final side event hosted by Sri Lanka. It is on a new publication regarding social development issues here in Asia and the Pacific. It will be in conference room 4 immediately after this session. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And this meeting is now adjourned.